All right, without further ado, Krisanne Hall.
Inevitably, what happens is this. One person will stand up, and then everybody else will stand. Throughout history, the power of change rests in the actions of one person. Our entire independence movement began with a man named James Otis Jr. Every period in history that involves monumental change has always begun with one person taking a stand. You're one man standing up and saying, no more. Not only will I not participate, I will not comply, and I will teach others the power of noncompliance as a right of the people. We have to become uncomfortable. Change will not happen without movement. And when we've been sedentary, when we've been comfortable for a very long time, movement is uncomfortable. We've been training our generations in the wrong information about government. We have been training them to be submissive and compliant to authority. We have forgotten that we, the people, are the rulers over government, and we have allowed government to be the rulers over people. If we truly want that to change, we have to stop looking for leaders and start being them. And I thought to myself, we weren't taught this in life. We don't teach this in grade school. We don't teach this in high school. We don't teach this in college. Why is this information being hidden from us? And I want to teach you, to equip you, so you can know the truth about limited government power. To inspire you, to ignite you, to be the leader your spirit is calling you to be. That our governments, federal, state, and local, are operating outside their created authority and engaging in massive overreach to the destruction of our rights. I want you to notice from the very beginning, we are the head of government. That if they are operating outside our consent, their power is not just. And let me just put this out there for any of the politicians who will tell you, because I've had these conversations with them, well, you elected me, so you consent to what I do. No. Your election to office is not a blind consent for me to be obedient in anything that you can think of and pass by a majority of your body. However, our silence and compliance becomes our consent. That word state means independent government. Your state is an independent, sovereign government, just like Great Britain, France, or Spain. You know what's amazing? Our states were created with greater sovereignty than any other country in the world because we were created under the principle that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Who created the states? The people, right? By the authority of the people, the document. To secure our rights is the singular purpose for the existence of any government. There is no other purpose in government than to secure our rights. Not our rights in the collective, our rights as an individual. What kind of document is our Constitution? The document of our Constitution is a legal document. It is a contract. It is a specific kind of contract that we call a compact, which means from legal language, the states are the parties to the compact. Because the Constitution was not ratified by popular vote of the people, then the people are not a party to the contract. It was ratified by the states, which means the states are the parties to the contract. Now, states ratified the Constitution that created the federal government. The federal government did not exist until the Constitution was ratified. So in legal terms, the federal government is the product of the contract. You cannot be a party to the contract if you are the product of the contract, because you cannot sign the contract into legal being if you do not exist until it's signed. So when our states created the federal government, they created a limited federal government. How did they create the limited government? They did so by specifically enumerating its power. If it's not listed in the Constitution specifically, it does not rest as an authority in the federal government. And then the states did the most important thing they could have ever done. They reserved all other power to themselves. This is James Madison. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. And what's the one single purpose for creating government? To secure our rights. That's the condition. The purpose of the power we've delegated to you is to secure our rights. So what about the CDC, the EPA, the FDA, and the Bureau of Land Management? What about the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, USDA, ATF? What about the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Interior, Department of Ag, FAA, FCC, SEC, and any of these other things three letters you can string together? All of these powers are reserved to the states. How do we get a federal government that is actually exercising power that is not only not delegated, but reserved to the states? Because our states comply. Now, there are various reasons why they comply, most of it extortion. And what we need to understand in this relationship of power being reserved, the federal government is just as much of a foreign power as France or Texas within your state. If the power is not reserved, and the states must simply do whatever the federal government tells them to do, then you must admit that the states are not sovereign. And if the states are not sovereign, they're like your 15-year-old. They can't make a legally binding contract, which means the Constitution itself is null and void, which means our federal government exists of its own authority with unlimited power, which means we do not live in a constitutional republic. We live in an absolute monarchy or an oligarchy with unlimited power to dictate to the people. But here's the good news. Our states are sovereign. The Constitution is still a legally binding contract. And the federal government is still legally limited in its authority. And the only thing that has to change is this. Because we've been taught the wrong things for a long time. Understanding this was kind of mind-blowing to me. 3 years of law school, nobody taught me this. Do you know that our law schools don't actually teach the Constitution anymore? Do you know what's ironic? The Constitution is a contract. The Constitution is the only contract in America where lawyers and judges refuse to apply contract law. The power of the state to check and balance unauthorized authority exercised by the government rests in our power to say no. And if we don't have the authority to say no, then we are not free. Say no. We're expecting the states to say no. Your state governments are supposed to be the greatest opponent to the federal government, not their best friends, co-workers, and on the same payroll. The federal government can exercise no unconstitutional law unless your state allows them to do it. If you get control of your state and local government, you don't care what the federal government is doing because they will never be allowed to do it in your state unless it's consistent with the Constitution. When we comply with unlawful authority, we give that unlawful authority. We give it power. not just over ourselves, but over future generations. We create a mental precedent that says, well, we've been doing that way forever, so it must be okay. Now, we've been allowing government to assume authority over our lives for a very long time. Do we have to sue them to get it back? No. Suing the federal government to get out what legally belongs to us is not only unnecessary, it's ridiculous and dangerous. Why? Because suing the government to get back what already belongs to you is like Ben suing me to get his car back, showing up in court and finding out that the judge and the jury are all my family members, right? So if the state is suing the federal government, where is the state suing the federal government? In federal court with judges that are appointed by the federal government. When the states sue the federal government to get their power back in federal court, what they're admitting is the federal government is the ultimate authority on its own limit of power. And when we sue the states to get our power back, what we are saying is our state constitutions are null and void, that they have no authority, and we're begging for what already belongs to us by creative right. That's why we must say we will not comply. Peaceful noncompliance is the most powerful tool. Peaceful noncompliance is the people enforcing the supreme law of the land when the government is acting unlawfully. The sheriff is your most important ally in the securing of your rights, because your sheriff is not a hireling of the state, not a hireling of your county. Your sheriff is a constitutionally elected representative of the people. It is his duty by oath to secure your rights. It is not his duty to blindly enforce the law, because your sheriff is the highest authority in your county. Your sheriff has an authority to deny enforcement of laws, state or federal or local, that do not secure your rights or work contrary to your rights. This is Sheriff Brad Rogers from Elkhart, Indiana. He stood up to the federal government. And we have learned today an overreaching government is breaking the supreme law of the land, which makes them criminals. If you don't have representatives who understand it's their duty to secure your rights and not violate them, then it's your authority to take that power back and defend your own lives, liberties, and properties. Shelley Luther did.
A defiant North Dallas salon owner says she's going to ignore a court order.
She said, taking my business without due process and just compensation is a violation of our Constitution.
The Dallas salon owner who opened up her business Friday, despite state and Dallas County shelter-in-place orders saying she couldn't.
I just know that I have rights. You have rights to feed your children and make income.
For the governor to issue an order that says I cannot operate my business is a taking of my business by that government. It is unlawful, it is unconstitutional, it is null and void, and me and my staff, we will not comply.
Yes! Luther tore up the citation.
Not only is it a taking, it's a violation of the Texas Constitution, perpetrated by the governor, by the county, and by the sheriff. If you had been told that in 2020, a pastor would be arrested in America for having church. Arrested by a sheriff for having church. This pastor stood in a pulpit and said, government doesn't own my church, it's under the head of Christ, and government cannot shut down my church. And this sheriff arrested him for it.
This is T.J. Holmes.
In my experience as a prosecutor in the state of Florida, I have never seen a sheriff dispatch helicopters dispatch out-of-county deputies and hold a press conference to announce the arrest of someone accused of violating a second-degree misdemeanor. And this pastor said, I am not the subject of government. Government is the subject of me. And if you are violating the rights that have come to me by God, then you have null and voided your authority.
Get out of this property immediately. Out of this property, you Nazis! Gestapo is not allowed here. And don't come back without a warrant. Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths. You Gestapo, Nazi, communists, fascists. Don't you dare coming back here. And they're coming to intimidate Christians during the holiest festival? Unbelievable. What is wrong with those sick psychopaths?
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We have a power. We have an obligation. We have a posterity waiting for us to say, we will not comply, so you will be free. And I just need to know, who is willing to stand? You see, when one stands, they're no longer alone. Abigail Adams, writing to my favorite founding mother, Mercy Otis Warren, said, "The flame is kindled, and like lightning we watch as it spreads from soul to soul.